Hey guys, this is Ace Gallo, and I'm going to be showing you how to use the preflop functionality of the new PioViewer PioSolver software. So, the first thing you want to do is open up your PioSolver folder. This says 1.4, but it's upgraded to the newest one. And here we have the PioViewer preflop exe, and we're going to open that up. And the preflop one is going to have the full preflop tab. The older one doesn't have this, so we need that. The next thing, and I think is the source of a little bit of confusion at the moment, I'm sure is going to be updated soon, but for now there's like two different solver types that you need to connect to. One of them is the preflop solver, one of them is postflop solver. The preflop solver can do postflop solving. It just is slower and a little less accurate. It's not going to converge down to a low Nash distance as quickly as the postflop solver will. The reason that we have the preflop solver is it is designed to use less RAM, so you can fit much bigger trees on the same amount of RAM, and that is very useful for preflop solving. So there's two different solvers, and people are trying to view preflop stuff when they have their postflop solver open, or they're trying to open up postflop stuff that they solved on their postflop solver, and they're currently in their preflop solver, and it's giving them error messages, and people are asking what's going on, and then they just get told that you're using the wrong solver, and that fixes the problem. So you want to make sure you're connected to the right one. In this folder here, I have the Edge 16 for me is the postflop solver, and I have a custom compile for myself for preflop because I have an AMD processor, which the main solver that you get shipped is usually designed more for like the Intel chips. So it was just a little gift from the developer. But I also have the preflop here, which is what most of you will be using, so you want to make sure you select that. For me, I'm going to be using this one. And if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you can see it says connected to, and the last bit there is the solver type that you're connected to. So you can check that to make sure you're using the right one. And now we're going to go into the full preflop tab. And this is where we're going to be setting up our preflop trees. So to give you just a quick overview of where everything is, we have the out of position and in position ranges. Generally, you're just going to want to keep these at 100% if you're doing full preflop solving. If you were doing solving for, let's say, the big blind defending against an opener, like from the button or any other position in like a three-handed plus game, then you might want to use this for, let's say we're having the button open and we're looking at big blind play versus a button fixed range. Then we'd want to click this open and set in what we think the button is opening, and start the tree there. In that case, let me start from a different point. Let's just go over the basics first, and we'll cover how to do that later. So those are the ranges there. We'll get to that later when we do something for like button versus big blind. We have the effective stacks, the out of position players money in the pot, in position players money in the pot, and extra dead money in the pot. So generally, you're just going to want to do this based on, like, if you're doing a 6 max blind versus blind, you're going to want to set the bigger amount to be the in position player and the smaller amount to be the out of position player, because a small blind being out of position posts that. And if you're doing heads up scenarios, then you're going to want to do this. And extra dead money in the pot is good for antes. It's also good for let's say we are doing a button opening, we're going to let's set that up now. So if the button opens, he's going to be the in position player, right? And his money in the pot is going to be 0. And the out of position player's money in the pot is going to be 10 because he's the big blind. And the extra dead money is going to be the 5, which is the small blind's post. So it can be used for antes, it can be used for when you're setting up trees that aren't starting purely from preflop, like after an open. So you could use it for dead money for that. Cool. And what else we have here? Create new tree. You're going to want to click that to update your tree. Up here, we can see the effective stacks listed with the starting pot and current pot. You'll notice that if I change any of this stuff, it's not being updated. So when you set up a new tree, you need to make sure that you click Create New Tree or Rebuild Existing Tree with New Pot and Effective Stack Values button. That is a long name for a button. So let's say we're setting up a 50 big blind spot. We'll put it as 500 here. It's just what I'm choosing to do. And let's say we're setting up a button. Button's opened and the big blind is defending, right? So again, out of position player here, we're going to give him 1 big blind, which we're going to put here as 10. And the in position player's money in the pot is going to be 0. Extra dead money in the pot is going to be 5. That's the small blind's post. And then we're going to click Create New Tree. And you see that updated this up here. So effective stacks are now 500. Starting pot is 10, 0, and 5. And now we can add actions to the tree, but before we do that, we need to select where those actions are going to go. So we're going to start from root. And here we're going to say that the button is opening. Let's say he opened to 2.5 big blinds, right? So 25. And we're going to click this raise button, and we add a new node to this game tree. So for this scenario where we have the button opening, we're only focused on this. We're not going to account for him having a folding range or a calling range since we're just paying attention to this, right? So when he raises, we're going to say that the big blind can 3-bet him, let's say to like whatever, 70, which would be 7 big blinds, and he could also just shove. You can enter any number here as long as it's over the total stack size, and it'll just make it whatever that max amount is. He can also call, or he can fold. So it's important to go through this and make sure that you're accounting for every action that you want to have in there, and that you're including the calls and the folds. You'll get a warning if you set up a tree that doesn't include call or fold in a spot where it can. But you can also dismiss that like we're going to do here because we're not including call or fold in this branch. So facing the 500, which is an all-in, he can call or he can fold. Those are his only options. Here we could say that he can shove or he can call. Oops, I messed that up. So we're going to remove selected action by highlighting this call. We're going to go back to this node. He can also call or he can fold. Now against the all-in, this player can call or this player can fold. So you always need to go back and select the node that you're adding actions to. So you can't just click call and then click fold, because like we saw, it'll just add the fold after the call. No action to take after call or fold, and that's it. So we have this simple tree right now, and we see these 2 boxes that are in green. When these boxes are in green, it signifies that there's post-flop play. So we need to set up that post-flop play, and we can do that by clicking on the box, and we get this panel to the side, which is just like your regular post-flop panel here. So here we're going to say something like in this 3-bet pot, he can make a half pot bet, half pot raise, let's say like 65 on turn, and we'll give him like a 4x sizing, and then 110 pot on river, and 5x sizing. So don't take this to the bank, but in my experience, going over stuff like this, it's generally okay to have like fairly realistic sizing for post flop and bigger sizings for turn and river. I think in a lot of spots you can get away with just using really big sizes on river. I don't think it's going to have a drastic effect on EV of hands pre-flop. Now, like, there's definitely going to be some minimal effects from that, at least, and you know, ideally you would include every possible size, but that would make the trees just way too big. So I think going with, like, you know, reasonable sizing on flop and then bigger sizings on turn and river here, I don't think this is all that unreasonable to use anyways, just for a normal post flop simulation. But there's going to be some trees that I would set up where I would just like only have 150% pot river, and I think that's fine. You know, I'm not 100% sure that's the best way to go about it, but it definitely gets the tree smaller. And in my limited experience doing these pre-flop sims, it really doesn't make that much of a difference. If you make this river sizing like 200, or if you make it 100. So yeah, for whatever that's worth, and I'm sure we'll find out more about this stuff as more and more people do it, but that seems to be the consensus right now. As long as you're not using like just totally crazy sizings everywhere, use a reasonable sizing on the flop, somewhat reasonable on turn, and big sizing on river should be fine. For the sake of this video, I'll just copy here, not do anything too detailed, and we want to make sure, at least I do, that especially when we have something like the out of position player here being the 3-better, that we allow him to have an out of position bet. I don't think that's going to be that important on this tree where he just called a raise. So here I'm going to even say something like, we'll say like 55, 50, 40 is fine too. And say like 70 on turn, and maybe 5x, and then 120 and 5x, because the starting pot on the flop after this call is going to be much greater stack to pot ratio, so the tree is going to be a lot bigger. And on top of that, just generally in smaller pots, you tend to see bigger sizings being used, especially on turns and rivers. So I think this is fine. It could even go bigger on the river, so I'll do that. And you could pay attention to all-in thresholds. Again, I'm not too sure that it's going to be that important to make these post-flop trees all that perfect. You just want to get close enough, and I think you generally do, but you could definitely bump this up a little bit, maybe make it like 70, 75. If I were doing like something where I was going to dedicate a lot of my computer time, I would take the trade-off in adding a little bit more time to do the sim, for making sure that it's a little bit closer to real world play, to more accurate results. So, you know, I'm not going to always cut corners. I'm going to try and find good ways to cut corners without being too crazy about it, and just trying to only focus on getting the tree size small. But, you know, it depends on the limitation of your computer and how many flop subset you are comfortable with looking at things through, and, you know, just how many you can fit in RAM, or if you're renting a virtual cloud computing thing, then you don't even have to worry about that. Nothing really else to add. I guess you could do this for like a 50 big blind spot. I don't know, like 4 cap go all in when making nth bet on a given street. So I think that's pretty straightforward. The 4th bet that goes in on any given street has to be all in, even if otherwise it would possibly be a non all in. just as soon as the program gets to its fourth bet, it says, nope, I don't care what sizing you told it to use, we're going all in. So this looks fine. We have both of these done. You really want to make sure that you go over it with a fine-tooth comb if you're going to be doing a sim that's going to take a lot of hours of computing time, because you don't want to, like, let it run for a day and a half and then find out that you just messed up something silly and your solution is just worthless. So you want to make sure that you have everything done the right way. Go over it a couple of times, and then when you're comfortable, you're going to run it. So the next step after we have set this up, we're doing this button open. So I probably should have done this earlier, but it's like I was doing before. So since we're just worried about the buttons open here, not as limping or folding ranges, we're going to have to assign his range. And let's just give him something like this. Sure, whatever. It's fine. And the out of position player here, the big blind, is going to have every hand because we're worried about, what hands he's going to fold, what hands he's going to call, 3-bet, all that. So we're not going to remove any of those hands. And this looks like the full tree. So the next step that we need to make is selecting our flop subsets. So the guys at PioSolver were good enough to include these preflop subsets, and they have everything from 5 flops to 487, which is probably more than you'll ever realistically need to use. I think it depends on the effective stack size situation that you're looking at. I found that for short stack play, say under 15 big blinds, the sims that I got running on like 20 flops were very comparable to the sims that were run on like 80, 90, and 100 flops. But I think that if you were to run sims on much deeper stacked play, that you might see the frequencies being less accurate. I'm not sure about that. It's just my guess, but you could definitely toy around with that and find out. But yeah, so for short stack play, I found a really low number of flops got you a good general idea. There would be combos that were off compared to better solutions and what they were doing, but generally, like, the percent of folds or 3-bets or calls were really close, and the types of hands that were being used were very, very close. Like, if you took 2 images, one of being simmed on like 20 flops and one being simmed on 90, they would look very, very identical. There would just be a couple of combos that were doing weird things in the smaller flop subset. Like, you would just see maybe like 5s. Any combo that had a 5 was a little more likely to do something like raise more often or fold more often than it probably should be, and when you compare it to a bigger solution, it wasn't doing that. But definitely good enough to like get a picture and get an idea of what's going on. And for my purposes, when I use this type of software, that's all I care about. I care about the general frequencies, the look of things, and then being able to, like, look at the solution and think backwards to why things are the way that they are and what changes if I adjust something. And I'll go over that in a little bit, how to do that a little better. But so let's say we're going to do, 20 flops. We pick that subset. Now I should go over this. In every folder, there's going to be 2 different files. From everything I gather from hearing the PO guys talk about it, they're essentially just as good as each other. They're just there to have more options. So pick either file, should be fine. It really doesn't matter. It's just, in here you're going to see the number of flops that are included in the file. And if you select either one of them, it'll be fine. I kind of wanted to open it up to show you guys what it looked like, so let me pull that up. So I'm going to just open this one up, and we see like there's a file here with 20 different flops, and the numbers next to it is the weight of the flop, so the frequency with which the program weights how often this flop comes up. And this is done to just get more accuracy. Like certain flops are going to come up more often than other flops, so we're adding weight to those flops. Cool. There's a really cool blog post on the PioSolver website about the method used to pick the flops that they did, and just how good these flop subsets can be, and how close to the real deal you can get with a limited number of flop subsets. And it's just a really good read, so I'll include that link at the bottom of this video, and you guys could check that out. But needless to say, like I said, running sims on just 20 flops, I was getting like scarily close accuracy to the real deal. Now, like, if you want something to just like plot out your actual pre-flop strategy, and for whatever reason you want to, just mimic what you're seeing and try to like approximate GTO play, it's definitely worth going for, for shorter stacked stuff, probably 80-90 flops, and for deeper stacked, maybe even a little bit more. But if you're just worried about like seeing the general picture and the frequencies, then you can get away with small flop subsets. So for a tree like this, where we have a button opener, I have 16 gigs of RAM, which apparently is not even all that much anymore. When I first got this computer, 16 felt like really cool that I had that, and I didn't know that many people that even had that much, but now people are talking about getting 32 and 64, and I know some guys that have 140 or so. So 16 is not recommended for running pre-flop play on PioSolver. I think the minimum recommendation is 32, and it's a lot better if you can get like 64. But for using something like versus a fixed open like this, I found that I can squeeze in like 60-ish flops even on 16 gigs if I'm smart about how I set up the post-flop trees. So, and again, that's on short stack play, but 60 is definitely good enough for me. And like you can rent a computer, like a cloud computer, to do better, or you could just buy a machine. If you're going to spend the money to get the PioSolver Edge, you're probably also going to be wanting to spend the money to get a machine that has 32 gigs of RAM. So yeah, all right, we have this tree set up. I am not going to build it because I'm running the video recording software, and again, I don't have all that much RAM. But when you're done here, you're going to click Build Tree. So for the sake of this video, I will do a 5 flop subset. It's recommended to open up your resource monitor. And this is a good way to see exactly how many flops you can fit in your sim, right? So we're going to take a look here at memory, and when we click Build Tree, we're going to see the solver jump to the top and show us how much RAM it's taking. So with 5 flops, we're going to build tree, and we're getting this error message: one or more nodes, including R0, which is the first action after root, or really starting from the root, is missing fold or call actions. Your tree might be incomplete. It's really good that they did this because some people were setting up spots where they have the shove, but they're not including call or fold at the end of the shove. So for our purposes here, it's okay. Our tree is set up fine. We're intentionally cutting out the folding and the calling ranges for this node. So we're just gonna dismiss this and set this up. Take a look, and here's solver A's, which was my pre-flop solver, is building the tree. And it looks like we get to just under 2 gigs of RAM being used, right? So now I can just use math to figure out how many flops I can fit in. 5 flops takes 2 gigs, so we can divide by how much total RAM you have by that, and you can see how many flops you can fit in. When you're done with this, the next thing that somebody had asked me about, they said, I set it up, I click build tree, and then I go to the browser tab, and it's just like it's not moving. The strategy just keeps saying 25% each or whatever, and I've been doing it for like an hour. And they didn't realize that you actually need to go to the tree building and calculation tab and click go. I do think that they should probably have a go button on Preflop, but it's not that hard to click over to this tab and click go. So when you click go, it's just going to start running, and it'll be a little slow, especially for me on AMD. It's not a very fast processor compared to like an i5 or an i7, but you get sims done quick enough for me. Like I didn't think that we were going to be at the point in 2016 where we were going to have preflop solving commercially available. So any speed is pretty impressive to me. But I get sims out overnight usually if I want to run a decent sized tree. I just go to sleep and leave the computer running, wake up the next day, and there I have it. And if I want to do a bunch of them, I can just set it up on a cloud computer and do that. And then you have your tree here, so like you can browse through it even while it's solving. I think it's not recommended to go to the river for sure, I know, and I'm not even sure if it's recommended to go through flops. But you can, say like we get to a call, you're going to see, here's the 5 different flops. I think right now, if you have like 60 flops, you're still only going to see a very limited number of them available. So you can't actually browse through the post-flop play. But I think in the next release that's coming up, you'll be able to. So, you have that for whatever it's worth. I mean, the post-flop trees, they're not going to be like that super valuable. Again, we're setting them up generally in a way that we could improve on them a lot, and we're just trying to get preflop EVs and general preflop play. When you're done, it's generally recommended to do forget turns and save. Okay, so that's something to talk about. When you run PioViewer, by default, this is not going to be checked, right? So you're just going to see this when you go to File, Forget Rivers and Save. So that's just, that's saving pre-flop and turn. Those are huge for pre-flop sims where you have a lot of different flop play. So you need to go to Tools, Configuration, and click here on Enable Forgetting Turns. And then this will be available. And this is what you're going to want to do to save preflop, unless you just have a ton of storage for saving, including turns. And I think that covers all of it. Something new in the newest release of the viewer that wasn't there before is you can change the sizes of arrays, say, without having to completely delete all of the tree ahead of it, which was a little bit of a pain if you accidentally set up the wrong sizing here. So we can, change 70 to 65, and it's going to keep the rest of this intact, which is great because I definitely did that a few times at least, where I set something up and then realized after that I entered a wrong amount or something, and I needed to delete this node here and replace it, and that meant also recreating all of the other stuff. So that's nice to have. You can save the script with currently selected set of flops, and you can just name it whatever you want. And then you'll have that saved for next time. I'm not sure. Oh, I think that saved it too. Oh, that was a script. Sorry. So if you want to save the preflop parameters, you can click here. Sure, we'll replace that, and boom, we get this. So we can always go back to it, even if we were to make a new tree. We can go right back to this. It has all of the stuff saved in. Cool. And saving post-flop tree parameters, by default, it already has all of your post-flop stuff, so you could just, save one of those. So if you want to make a brand new tree, but use like this template, you can save that in, and that's going to be very useful if you're going to be running a lot of sims, because as you can see, it takes a little while, especially for trees with more options, where you're going to have 3 and 4 bets, and options for the first player here calling and calling and shoving and all that. So yeah, build tree, do that, click go, and let it run, and you're going to have your post-flop sim. It will tell you here, just like your normal tree building, it'll tell you on this tree building calculation tab to the right side. It'll give you your steps. They're going to take a while, because obviously it's a lot more flops than the one flop that you're usually calculating on. But it'll be there. You can set it to stop after some amount of time, or some accuracy. And yeah, I think that does it for this. Setting up blind versus blind and other trees should be easy. You just need to add the extra options. The last thing is the build pure preflop tree with no flop exits. So this is pretty cool. You can even use it to verify some of the post-flop sims that you do for looking at the pre-flop shoving and calling, but you can also just do straightforward calling and shoving. So let's create a new tree, and let's say that we just want to have one where let's say it's 15 big blinds, and the button shoves that range, right? And we have the button just shoving. Any amount over the 150 is going to do it. So oh, I did not create new tree. See? So, boom, 150, no other options, and then call or fold. And we can build a pure preflop tree. Ignore this warning. And now we can run this. And it's going to very quickly get down to some ridiculously low exploitability. And we can stop it and take a look. So 15 big blinds deep. If the button is shoving this range, we can call with this range. And yep, that should do it. If there's any other questions that you guys have, just feel free to ask. I'm available if you need any help. You're a member of the Skype PioSolver chat or a 2+2 member, you can shoot me a message, and I'm available for coaching for any of this stuff and anything, no limit. So yep, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys later.